Welcome to the Artifact YouTube channel. Today, we're thrilled to present a masterclass by one of the world's most extraordinary watercolor artists. Please welcome Hazel Soan.
So for the minute, this yellow, which will probably look slightly warmer on screen, is coming across and coming to the edge of the light areas, coming across any area that's not quite as light as the lightest areas, and filtering into the cool areas, but not going all across them. Not too wet. I'm taking a little bit at a time, and I'm beginning to use my pencil lines are telling me where I can and cannot go with the brush. So basically, they are my guidelines. So I didn't use any lines that I didn't need right at the outset of the painting.
So this is your yellow raw ochre?
This is my yellow raw ochre, correct?
Yes.
And it's going quite across some of the light areas just by default, because I want to bring out, for example, this tusk here, which is lighter than anything else in the painting. But what I don't want to do is, I want to tell myself where I must leave light with this first wash, so that I'm giving myself useful information and a useful first brush stroke. So it's doing two things, really. It's starting to create the composition, and it's starting to create the light and shade. So this little fellow is dark. As you see, I've pulled him right across in front of the light here. He's darker than the elephant that than the side of the elephant he's against. So my brush goes straight across. And by using a big brush, I'm not having to be too careful where it goes beyond its very light color, so it doesn't harm anything. The main thing I'm trying to do is look over the whole painting so that I have an idea of it in totality, so that I'm painting the whole thing, not just painting with the trunk or the ear. Gradually, it will become less broad. I hope that lots of you are painting along with me, but I'm not sure. You know, sometimes it's easier to watch and then paint later because I know it's recorded. But I hope that in explaining it, you'll also be able to paint along with me. This is a very pale color, so it will stay. It won't harm any of the blue-gray color of the elephant. But I want to leave some for just to be blue, and just tell myself that there's shadows as well. And also that this, where it's lit, it's slightly darker behind. So in other words, I'm using the yellow ochre to be the color of the landscape behind. Probably use blue up there, so we'll probably take that back a bit. So it's basically the very, very first time I'm trying to find the light and shade, the pattern of light and shade. I've put a little tail on the end of this little fellow here because I felt it needed something to just finish off the side there. And to bring out this tusk, we need a bit of background there. Background in there, but we don't need that at this point. And just tell ourselves about that. And then immediately I'm going to, I'll rinse that off my brush. Otherwise, I've got another flat brush I could use, but I'm going to rinse it off and then pick up my Prussian blue. Again, very light, because I'm just telling myself where is the light and shade and where is the cool and warmth. So coming from this side now, and I'm trying not to be too edgy, probably because it depends on the size of your screen, but I'm trying to brush as loosely so that there is movement in the brush stroke and not too finite an edge. And again, this is a very pale color because it's our first layer. They look dark on the paper, but in fact, these are pale colors compared to what we will be using. And so they seem quite fierce to start with. And one has to just trust that these are going to look quite light in the end. And now I want to soften the edge here where this light comes, make sure this is still wet. There's a light here that I nearly lost because it was still there. Just let's put back some yellow ochre here. It's quite hot where I am, so it's drying quite quickly.
I hope you're enjoying this watercolor lesson. On our channel, we always share watercolor lessons from the world's top artists. And today, we have something special for you. Follow the link in the video description and sign up for a free online masterclass with another global watercolor star.
It's hot, obviously, in the bush as well, usually. Although sometimes because one's painting early, it can be quite cool. I just want to make sure I don't get hard edges there right at the beginning from the blue coming in. And then come down here and it's beginning to shape tusks there. And even in these early stages, you're beginning to see the form. That tusk actually is all in shadow. So this tusk isn't light. So this tusk can actually have the blue over it, because it itself in shadow, and as is this side of this tusk here. Come round through this ear. This is in shadow. Bit of shadow behind here. And all this while doing this, I'm getting to know my composition. Obviously, if I were painting from life, it's slightly different because your subject is moving, so it's a different approach. But this is working from something in the studio, my approach. And lots of the pictures that Alison showed you were quite large pictures. And so most of those were done in the studio from a whole bunch of photographic and sketched reference. So I'm going to just break the edge of that bloom with the hairs and use it to be some texture on this little ellie there. It's an odd sort of angle of light there. It's giving the tummy a little bit of, maybe I need to bring it across here a bit to just darken the bottom of the tummy. And then let's bring out the, let's use the big brush again. I want the clean water, so I'll clean that off. This is where I do want to make sure I've got a clean brush, so pressing it down to really clean it off. I think the other thing about watercolor is I absolutely love the paper. I love the paper. I don't want to ever hurt the paper, so I'm always very careful to kind of, make sure that I don't, in a way, when it first arrives and it's full of light, it's perfect, isn't it? And so I don't want to do anything on it that will damage it. So I feel great respect for the paper. Then I feel great respect for the brushes. And then, of course, I feel huge admiration for all the colors. So I think if you love a medium, you want to do it service. You want to do right service by it. And so I think that helps. I think the fact that it's such a glorious medium to paint with, and it's, it really... the transparency really is what makes it so special, I think, isn't it? Because no other medium is as transparent as watercolor. No other medium can do what watercolor can do. You can make all sorts of things happen with acrylic because it's, you can use, but you can never do what watercolor can do.
The luminescence is got a...
Correct. That's exactly what I was trying to look for a word like that. Thank you, Alison. Now, I think I'm going to be very vague here. It might be that I come in with some kind of landscape at a later time, but because I hadn't really thought about that, I don't want to plonk in that tree landscape because it doesn't really please me. It's the Mara. Oh, look, you can see the sun coming across. Look, as the sun goes down now, I've got real sunshine, real African sunshine coming across the painting. That's extraordinary, isn't it? It's going to cast lights. I hope it doesn't affect the recording too much. No, it's going again now. It's going again. Yes, so by choice, as any single pigment, and obviously the earths are all the similar pigments, so they're quite safe to use together because you're only using the one pigment. Then that's they're all the iron oxide earths. So that's a very good. These are, I have to say, excellent questions. Really good.
You have another question asking, what's your advice when it comes to participating in art competitions, please? And how did you approach them?
Well, funnily enough, when I was younger, I didn't. I had success with in England. We have the RA shows, and that was the main one I concentrated on. And I did have some success, which was useful with the oils, not with my watercolors. I don't think I ever got a watercolor in there. But over time, I found it a bit onerous entering competitions because having to get the paintings in those days, you couldn't send digital images. It was all the actual painting. And I was traveling a lot. And early on, I was quite lucky that I was selling my work. So I did quite a lot of competitions when I was younger. Didn't have much success, to be honest. And as I say, it was mostly oils that got accepted. It was very rarely watercolors, because in a way also watercolors only really came into their right in England in a way in the 80s and then 90s and then onward. So I'm probably not the right person to ask because I haven't done enough of them. And too often, didn't succeed. So, but you should never, one thing I will say, because I judge a lot of competitions, is never, if I wish I'd known this when I was younger, don't think that if you don't get in, that your work is bad. It used to depress me if I got rejected from a competition until I was a judge. And then I realized that judges have to look at the whole of the exhibition. So if there's loads of pictures of tigers, they can't pick them all. So if they've already picked, first two tiger heads sort of early on, even though there might be others that are really good, they can't have too many tigers in the show or whatever it is if it's a wildlife show. So, and the other thing is that just because you're rejected, it might be that you're, with watercolor, sometimes they're small and they're blown up now big on digital screens. And so you need to make sure you've got a really, really good photograph of your watercolor. That's very important. But also, if it's judging for a competition where the paintings are going to be in a show at the end, they have to work out numbers and sizes, and they have to make sure, as I say, different subject matter, but they also have to have different sizes and different media. And so if it's not, if it's a watercolor competition, obviously it's all watercolor. But don't let it depress you, because having been a judge now countless times, we have to let some very good paintings not get in because there's just too much choice. And it does not mean you have failed. And I say that, I want to say that strong, because it used to depress me, and you mustn't let it. It doesn't mean your work is bad. It just means it didn't, either your name's too far down the alphabet, which mine, of course, always was. And that means, you often don't get seen till the end. So basically, change your name to something beginning with A or B or C.
Thank you, Hazel. That was such an honest answer. You have another question. As an aspiring artist, should we prioritize learning with masters, or should we paint by ourselves to find our own style?
Oh, these are such good questions. These are all the right questions. I mean, I'm loving this. Look, nowadays we have this wonderful thing called Zoom, where you can learn with the masters from where you live and from your studio, and without having to commit, to great long courses or flying halfway across the world to paint with them. So I would say take advantage of that, because Zoom is a brilliant platform because you see close what's happening, and you can see brushwork, you can see, and it make you less afraid and make you more confident. And you'll see them make mistakes. You'll see them talk like I have about, I shouldn't have done that. It gives you confidence. But ultimately, it's the time you spend painting that will determine how you learn to paint. If you don't spend enough time painting, you can't expect to learn to paint. You've got to cover paper to become a painter. Paper is the expensive thing. I always say, tell everybody the only present you want from now on is really good watercolor paper for every birthday, Christmas, gift, anything, any anniversary, anything. You just want paper because you've got to be afraid to cover paper, and paper's expensive. And the problem is half the time we don't want to waste paper, but you actually have to be able to waste paper to be able to paint bravely. And you can paint on both sides, thankfully. That's a good thing. But so yeah, ultimately you have to paint to learn to paint. So, but take advantage of anybody offering you advice.
You have lots and lots of thanks from many people who have enjoyed the workshop, amazing painting, and loved your voice. You've got feedback. If you decide to put out a course there, people would immediately go and buy it. So just sharing some of the general comments that have been coming regularly along the session. And one last question is, do you still paint in oil? And if not, why not?
I do still paint in oil. So I've answered the question. I do still paint in oil. And I don't love it like I love watercolor, but there are some subjects, some events that I see, and particularly if I want to paint really big, that somehow I think I can't do this in watercolor. I can only do this in oil. And I can't tell you why. I don't know what it is that makes me think, no, this has to be in oil. It's very rarely that wildlife are painted in anything other than watercolor, but you can see behind me, when you're on the screen to know which way to point, but see behind me over there, that is a figure painting in oil. And I didn't even attempt to paint them in watercolor. I don't know why. I just felt I wanted to paint them in oil. And behind me are some ostrich, which I was trying to use oil like watercolor. I've used the very thin because I wanted to work big, and I haven't completed it yet, and I haven't completed it to my satisfaction. So it's been stuck on the wall for a while. It hasn't satisfied me yet. So yeah, I still paint in oil, but mostly when I paint in oil, it's using the opacity of oil rather than any transparency of oil.